Imagine, if you will, a sweltering Roman summer night in 1606. Near a boisterous tennis court, the metallic clash of swords shatters an already fragile peace. A man drenched in blood stumbles into a shadowy alleyway. Behind him, in the encroaching dark, lies a body growing cold. This murderer was no lowly thug, but the most esteemed and gifted artist in all of Rome. His name was Caravaggio. Tonight, by the soft pulse of the firelight, let us traverse the path of his true life through this story, one you need not labor to remember. He was the grandmaster who pioneered chiaroscuro, a madman who defined beauty through death, yet at the very zenith of his life, he became a fugitive hunted by the papacy. Along his oppressive and perilous path of exile, every drop of oil splashed upon the canvas seemed to whisper an ultimate paradox of crime and punishment. Let us, on this tranquil night, reach across 400 years of mist to find that most solitary soul searching for light within the deepest shadows in Caravaggio's life. There were no gray areas. His existence was as starkly black and white as his epoch-making paintings. In an era where every artist sought the holy, the divine, and the ethereal, Caravaggio cast his gaze toward the filthiest soil. He sought his models in Rome's most chaotic slums, casting prostitutes as the Virgin Mary and vagabonds as the apostles. The saints in his paintings had grime under their fingernails and street dust on their soles, their eyes etched with the raw agony of being mere mortals. This radical realism struck the church with unprecedented shock and fury. Yet, simultaneously, he possessed a technique that even God might envy: light. He wielded a beam of light so fierce that it sliced through pitch-black backgrounds with surgical precision, leaving both humanity and divinity nowhere to hide. When the cardinals stood before the altar and beheld the calling of St. Matthew, they were conquered by that heavy, oppressive stillness. Caravaggio became the darling of Rome, dwelling in its most palatial estates, yet he still insisted on prowling taverns at midnight with a longsword, seeking out adversaries. He seemed to be taunting fate itself. As long as light remained at the tip of his brush, the darkness could never truly consume him. Yet destiny never accepts a challenge. It waits for the moment of your greatest arrogance to deliver its most lethal blow. The murder of 1606 utterly dismantled the web of power Caravaggio had woven in Rome. He killed Ranuccio Tomasoni, a well-connected young aristocrat, over nothing more than a dispute involving a wager and wounded pride. The Pope issued a bando capitale, a death warrant which meant that anyone in Roman territory could claim a bounty by bringing in Caravaggio's severed head. Overnight, this emperor of the art world was transformed into a rat in the gutter. He began a grueling, agonizing flight fueled by anxiety and terror, with Naples as his first refuge. There, in the dead of night, he continued to paint, though his style grew darker and more suffocating. He realized by then that this darkness was no longer merely an artistic device on canvas, it was a literal judge of death looming over him. He began searching for a chance of absolution within every piece of art, depicting decapitated heads upon his canvases, and the faces of those severed heads were invariably his own. He was signaling his submission to the Pope, using art to rehearse his own death over and over again, hoping to trade his painted demise for a chance at life. To win his pardon, Caravaggio made the most desperate gamble of his life. He set sail for Malta. He hoped that by serving the Knights of St. John, he might earn a knighthood and thus wash away his crimes. There, he painted the largest and most breathtakingly suffocating masterpiece of his career, the beheading of St. John the Baptist. The painting is so colossal it commands the entire wall of the oratory. Within that vast hollow darkness, St. John lies upon the ground, blood seeping from his throat. The most chilling detail, however, lies in the pool of blood at the bottom of the canvas, where Caravaggio signed his own name. It is the only signature he ever left in his life, etched forever into the lifeblood of a saint. He received the accolades of the knights as he had wished, but his untamable instinct for violence soon became his curse once more. Only months later, he wounded a high-ranking knight in an internal brawl and was cast into a formidable stone dungeon. In that lightless, subterranean cell, Caravaggio faced the twin humiliations of death and the stripping of his honors. Yet he conjured a miracle once again. On a night of lashing wind and rain, using the same hands that had sketched countless divine wonders, he scaled down a sheer cliff face and vanished into the churning sea. After fleeing Malta, Caravaggio became a total specter, darting frantically between Sicily and Naples. Assassins from the knights trailed him closely. In one tavern ambush, his face was slashed so severely he nearly lost his sight. By this time, ravaged by long years of exile, disease and trauma, his psyche hovered on the brink of collapse. The last works he painted featured brushstrokes that were hurried and desperate, as if racing against time in his final hours. In his famed David with the head of Goliath, the young David wears no joyful expression of a victor, but rather looks with profound pity upon the slain monster. That monster, Goliath, bears the aged and distorted face of Caravaggio himself. It was a harrowing summation of his life, the demon filled with inner rage finally slain by the hand of the pure youth he so desperately longed to be. He sent this painting to Rome as his final tribute for mercy. Hearing that the papal pardon was finally on its way, he gathered his meager belongings and his canvases, boarding a ship bound for a small port near Rome. However, due to a case of mistaken identity by a lowly official, he was detained, missing the ship, and with it, the final ray of light in his life. In July 1610, on the desolate beach of Porto Ercole, a man runs in desperation beneath the scorching sun. He watches the small boat carrying all his hopes and masterpieces vanish over the horizon, finally collapsing from exhaustion onto the burning sand. A fever ravishes his mind. The rhythmic lapping of the waves against the shore sounds like a final requiem for this master of darkness. Thus Caravaggio died, just a step away from Rome, at the age of only 38. Shortly after his passing, the papal pardon finally arrived, but he no longer had any need for that belated document. He had rehearsed death 1,000 times in his paintings, and at last, in the silence of nature, he found total liberation. He left to the world those sacred relics that still reside in churches and museums today, radiating a blinding light from within the gloom. Through his most violent of lives, he proved that beauty can be reclaimed even from the deepest corners of darkness. Our story for tonight has ended. May Caravaggio's restless soul finally find peace in a dimension where there is no pursuit, only light and shadow. And on this quiet night, please let go of all your own entanglements and sorrows. The lights will fade, the turmoil will recede. You need only, in this moment, sink into the gentlest of dreams. Good night.